Welcome back to the Flyers Nitty Gritty Podcast, Gettin Gritty Wit It with your host, Yariv Wallach. I got a special guest and returning guest, Steve Kournianos from the Draft Analyst. Steve, welcome back. How you doing, buddy?
Good, Yariv. How you doing, man?
Doing well, and I'm excited since we last talked. And for those who are not aware, we did a first episode a couple weeks back. I believe it was episode 33. Steve came on for the first time and kind of went through a lot of Flyers prospects in general, but we talked about kind of the upcoming draft, so a little bit of a preview. We decided we'd do a post episode here after things have wrapped up. So the NHL has finalized the NHL draft. We've moved past that. We're now in a free agency territory as we record this. Having said that, the draft was pretty important, and it was, I would say the first round was slower than usual in the sense that the excitement around it, the trades and all that chatter wasn't there. Maybe a little bit because they're not in the same location as it's a virtual draft. But there were still some really high-end names that were taken this year, and a lot of talent went around. I think some of that talent even dropped lower where people were expecting. So, Steve, what did you think? What are your early thoughts on the draft? What do you think? Losers? The draft? Do you think that anybody kind of lost the draft day?
The longer I do this, the more I realize it's very hard to determine who's a winner and a loser. Usually in the beginning, the first few years that I've done this, I know people like report cards, and it's a big in terms of getting views, and people just love to see the draft report cards. But the more I did this, and I really had kind of like a come to Jesus moment in the offseason that I really don't think it's fair to rate a draft the next day, and the other thing is that I found that the drafts that I liked are the drafts that the teams drafted kids that I liked. And so, yeah, you might say that because of that, I have every right, since I follow these kids year round, to say, well, I like this draft and I don't like that draft. But the more I think about it, the more I thought about it, I realized that every team can justify every pick that they've made, and that they've done their due diligence, and that best player available does not mean the guy with the fancy stats or the guy that has the highest upside. It's every team has their own definition of what best player available is. Their draft boards are unique. And we saw that in round one, specifically with the Devils and the Blue Jackets, because the Devils took Shakir McCamadoulan. Now, I had him ranked in my first round for about half the season, and then because I expanded my my list in the second half, I watched more kids, specifically in the USHL, that he was able to get bumped down a little bit. And then Chinokov, being the overager, maybe ranked 35th by Central Scouting amongst European players, and Columbus took him in the first round. So to them, Jaeger Chinokov, like in Columbus's example, Jaeger Chinokov was the best player available for them at wherever they picked, 20 or 19. So outside of those two surprises, everything pretty much, though, went according to plan. I think my mock draft was 7 out of 10 in the first 10 picks, and then it kind of bottomed out a little bit. But in terms of variance, only, I think, 3 or 4 kids picked in the first round were really way off my rankings. Kids that, if I have you ranked in the second round and you get drafted in the first round and late in the first round, then you're pretty close. As far as like winners and losers, though, based on kind of like raising that eyebrow or not, I think that in terms of winners, I love what Minnesota did. Judd Brackett's first draft as the scouting director there. They walked away with kids that I really like a lot. They got Husnudinov in the second round. I had him pegged as a first rounder. They got Marco Rossi. They got Ryan O'Rourke. So those are 3 first-round caliber guys. And then you throw in Damon Hunt, the defenseman who was earmarked to be a first-round pick, but he had some injury issues. So you're almost getting 4 first-round picks in one draft. I liked what Florida did for the first time. They kind of stuck with the consensus, and they drafted some really high-end guys. I mean, Carolina's the same way, but Florida getting Heineman and Sordiff, who's a first-rounder for me, Lundell, Smolanic. Those are excellent picks. As far as losers, well, listen, Arizona, you have to consider them a loser because not only did they not have a first or second or third round pick, but I mean, they also lost that second round pick because they got punished for the illegal private workout scam that they did with the CHL. And then 2 of their picks were kind of like last minute. I called them coronavirus picks because they clearly were based on what they did to start this season and not what they were doing, let's say, in the Super Elite in Sweden in their draft year, because one guy didn't even play. And so if you want to believe that they were scouting this kid heavily in their way, but it just, oh, by the way, both kids that they drafted are off to red-hot starts in the Super Elite. So maybe it was like a kind of like react to contact thing, like, oh, my God, we need a draft pick. Oh, these guys are doing great. Let's draft them. Like, I don't know. Day 2 was incredibly long. It was very difficult to keep track. But again, like under the circumstances, I think that the league did a really good job getting it done. The way that the whole Zoom thing and I got the sense that the coverage was kind of okay. Didn't seem like some of the analysts on TV knew a whole lot about the kids as usual. So if I could give it a grade, I'd say they get like about a B plus. The NHL does for their coverage. And listen, I think 187 kids drafted were in my draft guide. So I had intimate knowledge of almost 90% of the kids taken. And it really went. A lot of teams drafted all kids that I had ranked in my top 217, or close to it at least. And so when teams do that, I'm going to obviously have a favorable view of the proceedings.
That's awesome. And by the way, to anybody who isn't aware, and I'll put another link in this episode for it, but Steve does sell pre-draft. What do you refer to it as? Sorry.
The NHL draft report.
Yeah, the draft report. I'm sorry. So the NHL draft report. So he has his own that he does. He's been doing it for several years already. I think 2015. I think was the first year, potentially.
Yeah, 16. That's why I did it for free. I would just put the PDF up there and had 150 scouting reports on it. And
well, that's still pretty cool. But yeah, you can go there. Definitely check that out. He's got awesome free content on there too. So even if you're not looking to spend money, just go check out what he has to say. I've definitely been on there quite a bit. So, but yeah, no, I really like a lot of what you said there, and about no real winners and losers, because what you really don't even know, and sometimes you don't know till several years later. And a lot of times, how are those kids used? Did they have any injuries along the way that maybe they were a good pick at the time, and then they had a problem down the line, stuff like that. There's some famous cases. And there's other guys who are like, wow, what happened to that guy? And then you find out he had some head injury and never really made it, just kind of disappeared. There's a lot of guys like that, even through the Flyers history. Guys who just, they thought they were NHL players, just never really made it. But with Arizona, I wonder if they're just dealing with a lot of organizational problems in general. Yeah. And how that just seems to be reflecting in everything they do. And I feel sorry for that fan base that.
Yeah. I mean, listen, they went all in to compete, and they had that success in the play-in round, and now you're gutting the team. All the big guys are going. You lost your GM. He walked out. They've never hit on the lottery. They've never really been rewarded for being a poor team in the past. So they have good players there, but yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Not easy.
They do have good players, and it's like they did take a step forward. They showed an investment for the future, and now whatever happened there, and I have a bunch of speculation, so I don't want to worry about that.
Yeah,
but, it's like all of a sudden now they're just taking a step back, and probably my guess is also financial reasons that we're not aware of, or at least
sure. Yeah, you have to assume that.
Yep. So okay, so we have our surprises. Who do you think? And I'm going to base this purely on the draft because free agency is a whole different animal. Do you think any team directly improved? The Rangers are probably the easiest ones, right? But what team directly improved themselves the most through the draft for the immediate future, you think, that will see a largest impact from that draft?
I'm being honest with you. Some of the better teams had really good drafts. I mean, I think St. Louis had a really good draft. St. Louis, these kids may not be available next year, but considering that you got to figure their window is open for a couple of years, some of the guys they got, really mature kids, ready to go physically, Leo Loof, Dylan Peterson, Jake Neighbors, those kids, I could see them making an impact at a minimum in the AHL level within 2 years. But other than that, yeah, short term, it's tough. I mean, it's not the NFL where these kids are going to be earmarked for starting jobs right away. You'll see Byfield in the NHL with the Kings next year. You'll see Lafreniere in the NHL with the Rangers next year, but maybe Stutzla with Ottawa. Maybe Jake Sanderson makes the team out of camp and he decides to skip college. But I think this is a group for the most part that you'll see take at least a couple of years more so than we've seen in like the 2015 group. Those guys were in the NHL within 2 years, like so many of those top kids. So as far as the defensemen go, if I could pick one maybe who steps right in and is able to be a difference maker, I would say either one of Drysdale or Sanderson, only because the teams that drafted them could kind of use them. And Anaheim always willing to play young kids. They've had games where they had 8 rookies in the lineup, so I don't think Drysdale will spend all that much time. He's actually one of my dark horses to outside of the Byfield Lafreniere duo. I think Drysdale is my dark horse to make an NHL team out of camp, at least for the 9 games, only because he adds that wrinkle to that offense, and they've always been willing to play these kids no matter what.
That's a really interesting point. So were you surprised when you saw Jake Sanderson get taken at 5?
No, I had a mock there. I had the Sens hit my mock. I had 3 and 5 Stutzler Sanderson, and they hit it. And Sens fans were beating me up over it for weeks because they wanted Byfield and Raymond, and they were all speculating that because Germany has ties with the German league, so because the Kings have ties with the German league, that they're going to draft Stutzler. And so when I did my mock draft, I said that the Kings have to take Byfield. He's the best player available, in my opinion, in that rank. And I just felt it made more sense to take a defenseman like Sanderson. They don't have any type of physical, punishing kid who has that elite game-breaking potential. They have physical kids and they have game breakers, but not one that could do both. And so I felt that it was the right thing to do. And
maybe they thought it was perfect compliment for Shabbat, like long-term as well.
Yeah, just the whole organization as a whole. When you look up and down that lineup, or the prospects that they have, the picks that they have at their disposal, it's crazy. Wow. So they're going to be a player in that division soon. We don't know how long it'll take.
As long as they don't shoot themselves in the foot, I would say. I feel like they keep doing that as well, a little bit like Ottawa.
The stupid owner there's cheap, and
yes.
He's like, he just owns the team for his ego. He doesn't own it because he wants to bring a winner to Ottawa. So, that's the unfortunate situation. So hopefully the Sens can get these kids, not in a way you kind of hope, and this goes for a lot of teams, you hope that these kids don't explode into stars during their ELCs. You kind of want them to be gradual, because then you don't want to have to, obviously it's a Crosby situation. You want to give him, 12, 13 million a year, but we'll see. But I like what Ottawa did. Sens fans apparently hated it, but
yeah,
I kind of like the way they went.
Yeah, and I like what you said overall. Like when I used to approach the draft, obviously I'm a little older now from when I first started, but I used to kind of have a lot of assumptions with draft picks and expectations and all that. Today, I don't really compare what my team did to other teams, right? Like the team I want to win. I kind of just look at the individual players and I go, well, what is this seed? What is this person? How can he grow? What is his potential? I don't go around comparing. And I really like that you said about no winners and losers too, because it's really just about potential everywhere. And maybe every team won a little bit. The one thing that surprised me, you said Quentin Byfield ready for the NHL next year.
Yeah.
You truly believe that out of camp, like, and everything?
Yeah,
I think Go ahead.
Yeah, I think they have to. You don't want to. It's very rare to take a second overall pick and put him in the AHL, and he's not allowed to be in the AHL. And so then you send him back to junior, and you run the risk of the injury, whatever. And what does Quentin Byfield really need to prove in the OHL? He's already been a dominant player in each of his first 2 seasons there. He could have been the league MVP this year, in my opinion. So like why are you setting him back there? Like just to have 2.5 points a game, or like just to make people happy? Like, no, he needs to really learn the system. He needs to learn the environment. He's playing in a huge market. Mm-hmm. All eyes are going to be on him. I think the sooner they get him acclimated, the better. And listen, he's got Anze Kopitar as a mentor. He's not going to get that kind of mentorship in Sudbury. Right. So I'm all for promoting him.
They still got Jeff Carter there a little bit. They definitely have those veteran names. Where do you think that fits in with Jake Filardi? Like, how do you think that? Do you think it competes there, or maybe they're complements?
That's the thing about, the Kings have a lot of quality center prospects. They have Kupari, They have Velarde. They have Anderson Dolan. They drafted Turcotte last year. And so, yeah, I've already said that if they draft Byfield, he automatically vaults to the top of that prospect pool, and it'll put the onus on the other kids to outperform him. And I do think that Byfield is the better prospect. There'll be some internal competition, but Gabe Velarde could play wing. So that might be not. I know he had a really good cup of coffee in the AHL. He had his injury issues, and I believe the Kings called him up as well last season. So you could always move him to wing. He played left wing when he was at Windsor in his draft year because they had Logan Brown as the #1 center. So I think that won't be a problem. And as for everybody else, I mean, yeah, you got to take it out. You got to earn it.
Yeah, no, it's a great problem to have. I mean, if you have too many centers, then you have very good wingers. That's how I kind of see it. All right, so it's a great overall brief look at the NHL draft. I do want to get down to the Flyers in particular. I think we can talk about a little bit about the Metro. Obviously, the Rangers, it's hard to say that they're not the winners because they get the best player in the draft, right? Yeah. But I'm interested to see, what do you think of the Metro overall? Before we go into the Flyers, do you think the Metro itself did a good job? From what I saw, I think I did. From what I saw, every team seemed to have got better through the draft on that night.
Yeah, even the two teams that never have draft picks and never do anything noteworthy and are always trading away picks to contend, that being Pittsburgh and Washington, they did really well. I mean, Pittsburgh walked away with two really good goalies in Klang and Bloomquist, and then they got a couple of two-way types. But same thing with the Caps. When you walk away from that draft with the likes of Oscar Magnuson and a late, what was he, like a 7th-round pick, you got Hendrix Lapierre, who, if things work out, could be a top 5 player to come out of this draft. And so I like what they did. Listen, the Metro is no joke. If you survive the Metro, if you just make the playoffs out of the Metro, you might as well be considered one of the top 5 teams. I mean, look at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was the 7th best team in the league, and they had to make the play-in round. They got pushed to that. And then Columbus being one of the later seeds too. I mean, Columbus is definitely not a mediocre team. They're a legit, I don't want to say call them a contender, but they're definitely a team that contenders don't want to play. Because the Metro is just a bloodbath. It really is. You got the geographical rivalries, the state of Pennsylvania, state of New York metropolitan area, but just really all the teams in that division. If I would earmark 2 teams to have some issues, like I guess in the relatively near future, it would probably be the Islanders, only because they haven't really been able to stockpile a lot of draft picks, well, kind of in 2018, but they're an old team, and they're in a win-now mode. The Flyers are also in that same boat, but they've drafted so many kids, and they've stockpiled on prospects under the Hextall regime that they law of averages said that at least 2 or 3 of those kids will turn out to be good enough to help the young Flyers right now that are there at the NHL level withstand any type of issues or losses. Let's say like when Giroux and Voracek move on, you have guys like Farabee, maybe Morgan Frost, some others who could step right in. So to answer your question, the Metro to me is the best division in hockey. I know that you got Tampa and Boston in the Atlantic, but there's bottom feeders in that division. And if the Devils are going to be considered our division's bottom feeders, then look out, because they've been drafting really well the last few years, and they got those 2 first overall picks. I mean, eventually these first overall picks are going to become, reach their prime and peak and be. So now the Devils have 2 of them, and Hughes and Hischier, and now they're getting a guy like Alexander Holtz. I mean, it's just a matter of time. So it's going to be much to the chagrin of the rest of the conference, really. It's going to be brutal. This is the one time where I say I like the parity and I like the realignment. Maybe change the playoff format and get rid of that stupid division and the 2 wild cards. Go back to the old conference setup, but the East is definitely better than the West. I don't think we could argue that.
I like that, and I totally agree with you about the playoffs thing there. I would like that as well. Go back to that older style. Okay, so that gets me excited because I agree with majority of what you said, and it's sucks to be in the Metro, but it's also exciting because you do get to see some of the best talent every single game. Not a lot of like wasted games in the Metro. So let's go into the Flyers draft picks. I want to go through who the Flyers took. I want to hear what you think. Whether you thought they were appropriately taken, and where you see their career projecting. Any of their pluses and their minuses. We definitely want to know, and we'll break these guys down considerably as we move forward. But let's go with the first pick here. So the first pick in the draft for the Flyers was number 23 overall, Tyson Forrester, right-handed winger / center. I'm not sure exactly how he's going to be used in the future for the Barrie Colts. What do you think about Forrester?
Well, Forrester is definitely a character kid. The scoring. A lot of kids know how to score in the junior leagues, but what separated Forrester from a lot of others right shots, besides his shot, he's got an elite shot, and the shot release is fantastic, especially off the pass. It was just that he carried his team. Barrie was not expected to do a whole lot this year, and he basically carried the team. And then they got rid of Ryan Suzuki, who was really the only other option they had up front. And they brought in a couple of guys. They brought in Vierling from Flint, and they brought in the other kid, Cardwell. I forgot where they got him from, either Peterborough or maybe Guelph. But in any event, that formed like the super line, and he was at the head of it as a wing. So it's very rare to have a line driving wing or really a team driving wing in a league like the OHL. And so he was able to do that. He's got good size, good hands, coachable, intangibles, you name it. Only drawback is skating, but it's not like it was bad. It was below average a couple of years ago. Now it's about average to, for considering his size, almost 200 pounds. He's probably slightly above average because he doesn't have a problem getting into open ice, doesn't have a problem finding time and space on his own, whether it be with his stick handling and his agility, or just his stick handling or just his agility. I mean, he's a kid that is very low maintenance, lethal threat on the power play. And so the fact that they took him at 23, I think I had him ranked in the 40s. But again, I'm watching kids all over Europe and all over North America. So you just get drawn to some. And I actually had Emil Andre, who the Flyers took later on, ranked ahead of Forster. So you could say maybe kind of like a little bit like an Isaac Ratcliffe type of a player where he contributes in all areas, but you wish the skating was a little bit better. But he's improving in it, and that's all you could really ask for. So I think it was a very, very solid pick.
Nice. And I assume you haven't seen him lately, right? Because it's been a while, right? Pre-COVID, essentially, is the last time you saw him play. Forster?
Yeah, I mean, I think March, the last time I saw him playing live action was March. So you have to assume that, knowing that there weren't going to be any private workouts or any combine, that he tried to stay his best to remain in shape. And usually the scouts or the agents will tell a kid, like, hey, listen, like, this is what we're hearing. We're hearing that people a little down on you because, you drink purple Gatorade, and the team doesn't like purple Gatorade. They like red Gatorade. So you have to start, so whether it be skating, whether it be stick handling, the kids know. They're not stupid. And they also read the independent scouting reports. They get feedback from their coaches. And a lot of these kids are very humble, and they'll say, well, what about next season? They'll say, I just want to improve my explosiveness, improve my skating. So I don't have any doubt that by the time Forster is ready to play in the NHL, his skating will not be an issue.
I like that. And actually, your intuition's spot on. I actually had an interview with his skating coach in the Barrie Colts, Paul Matheson the other day. We talked about that, and that's been what he's been working on. And I think he potentially jumped up the Flyers list. They said they had about 15 guys around that range that they were interested in. So that tells me that they made a decision, and I feel like they actually were taking safer picks in the past, same scouting group, and they kind of went for it. I think that big shot of his was exciting, and I think the development of his skating, and I've only heard so far, I haven't seen anything, that they're even expecting a larger jump. And then you see the fact he had 15 points his rookie year or something. He had a really small amount of points. He ended up with 80 the following year. That type of leap, the work ethic, I think they believe is there, right? And to your point, if they have the work ethic to work through that and they understand and they're humble, there's a good chance that he fulfills that, and he is a first-round pick caliber guy.
Yeah, the only concern would be that you won with the point jump. Is that, was it because he was motivated by his draft year, or was he really just making adjustments based off of what he did or didn't do in his rookie year? And I think it's definitely the latter, not the former. I think that he's the kind of kid that just needed to make some adjustments, and it was just way too dominant with Barry. He was I would say one of the top 5 players in the entire league. And that goes into not just because of the skill set and the points, because look, Marco Rossi, Jack Quinn, they all put up a lot of points. I was really drawn to the kid because of how he carried himself and how he wasn't begging for help or needed people to do work for him. He had a great attitude every shift, and he was willing to make his team dangerous. He would kind of be a momentum changer on shifts, not just with his stick handling or his shooting, but just in general, like any little thing that you needed him to do, he would at least try to do it. So I like that in young men when they realize that it's a team first game, and it goes beyond them.
Yeah, and that's actually what he said as well. And Brent Flower, our assistant GM, he said the exact same thing from the scouting report. So love that feedback, love the consistency, and that's what we really want to hear. Do you see him as a potential goal scorer in the NHL? Do you think?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got guys like
us or
well, I mean, it all depends on how he's employed or deployed. I mean, if you look at the Flyers, who they have at center, you look at a guy like Farabee, who's a left wing, is a playmaker from the wing. So I think any line that you put Forster on, you're going to want to have him serve as either the net front presence, the one-timer option from the circle. He could do his own fair share. Like I said, he drove his own line. So he could do the stick handling. He could execute the plays. He's always in motion. He's starting and stopping, not gliding around the ice, waiting for things to happen. He's the one that tries to make it happen. So if you put him on a line with guys like Morgan Frost or Joel Farabee, where they're the same way. They're always in motion and trying to create time and space and expand the ice and incorporate the defenseman into the possession. Then he's going to be really dangerous. I mean, you really cannot leave him open. And the thing about Forrest is he knows how to get open. So, of course, the enemy has a say, like they always say. The goalies are going to learn his tendencies. They're going to see him set up for that seam pass, and they'll probably so he'll probably have to fine-tune his precision a little bit and start gunning for that short side off the pass. Not that he didn't do that this year, but he's not going to be facing OHL goalies and wide-open shooting lanes like he did in the O. The OHL was a joke this year. So, again, let's be a little cautious. He'll have to adjust in the AHL eventually because he's just not going to get that type of open ice in a league like the AHL playing for a team like Lehigh Valley. So I would say to start, you're looking at, probably bottom 6, 10 to 15 goals, and then, little by little, you work your way up. But it's a very deep pool that he's got to contend with in Philadelphia. There's going to be no guarantee that he's going to be the top line right wing in, let's say, 3 years. He's got to fight for it.
From the standpoint that I'm coming from, that's what I want to hear. At least, that's the attitude going forward. But let's hope he does fight. Let's hope he's worthy of a first-round pick. And is there? I'm seeing in my head while you were talking, and I don't know if this comparison's there, but when you say Farabee, Frost, and then you think about Forster, is there any remnants there of a Farabee, Hughes, and Oliver Wahlstrom kind of mix? Maybe not the exact same type of players, but again, you get that speedy center, playmaker. You got the bigger shot right winger, and you had Farabee on the left wing. It's kind of what I'm seeing in my head.
That makes sense because Farabee was like a very key part of that driving possession, the cycles, absorbing the hits, dealing with a lot of the physical contact. Hughes, of course, being on the periphery with the playmaking and the skating, and then the finisher being Wahlstrom with that powerful one-timer and the right shot, crease crashing, whatever. So, Forster's that kind of guy. I mean, maybe not as pronounced as Wahlstrom in terms of the physicality, but he's a big, sturdy kid, and people bounce off him. So,
awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you have a lot of potential there. A lot of potential for, at least from a prospect camp standpoint, it'll be a lot of fun if you see the three of them on the same line. Although I don't think Farabee's going to be a prospect camp anymore. So,
nah. But we'll see. We'll see. It's just fun to speculate.
Yeah.
I just saw it in my head. All right, so let's move on to the Flyers' second-round pick, Emil Andrea, I believe is how you say his name.
Yeah.
Defenseman, 18 years old, somewhat undersized, and I think maybe that's even an understatement, at least from his height. I think he's at about 5'9", but a really thick kid at 183, which I think is very impressive for an 18-year-old, especially at that height. Some really nice offensive numbers. We seem really excited about him, at least from a fan standpoint. It seems like maybe some risk there. His weight offsets that, but there's some risk with the size. But the ceiling could be really high, and I think that's what gets us really excited. What do you think about Andre?
Well, he's been a first-round pick for me for most of the season. He was the best defenseman on the Swedish national team at the U18 and U17 level. He was the number one defenseman for HV71 that had a pretty deep blue line, including Anton Johannesson. When he played at several tournaments, he outperformed William Valnder, who got drafted higher. He outperformed Helga Granz, who I don't know if Granz got drafted higher, but and those are bigger guys with higher ceilings, or because they got the size. But Andre is no freaking joke, man. This guy's he's a tank. He hits everything. He's a playmaker. He absolutely posterized Askarov with a wrister at one of the tournaments I watched. He is a fantastic prospect, and I don't know how well it's going to translate to the NHL. I know that HV71 is a premier program in Sweden. He spent pretty much the entire 2019-20 season on the junior level, and easily one of the top defensemen in that league, whether North Division or South Division. But he gets promoted this year to start the season with HV71, and within a matter of 2 days, he's playing 19 minutes a game. I mean, that's almost unheard of. So 5'9" defenseman, his skating is more east-west than north-south. I would say his speed is like slightly above average, but his agility is off the frickin' charts. Elite level agility, spinning off of checks, dazzling, deking, walking the line, creating that time and space with either his stick handling or his footwork. On-ice general, power play quarterback, lead penalty killer, very tenacious, got a very high battle level, hates to lose, competitive. There's so many things to love about this kid. And the fact that he trucks people in open ice, or as best as he can, considering his size, really the only thing that hampered this kid was just a listing, a height measurement. That's it. So numbers are not in his favor. Law of averages says that he's not going to make it in the NHL because of his size, but we're seeing a shift. And I tweeted this out the other day. Like after every draft, I crunch all the numbers, all the rankings and the heights and the nationalities and what have you. And I think we saw double the amount of guys drafted 5'11" or under, or we saw double the amount of guys drafted 5'9" other than just a year ago. So last year, I think you had, last year you had, I think like something like 11 or 12 5'9" or under, and this year you had almost 24. Well, something close to that. I forgot, not all these numbers.
It's all good.
But in any event, the Flyers are getting a guy with number one upside. And will we ever see a number one defenseman in the NHL who's 5'9"? We've had some guys that came pretty close to it, in the past. Maybe not superstars, but I could go back to guys like Greg Hallgood and Norm McIver, where they were able to put up points in the NHL. You got Sam Gerard right now in Colorado, who was a fantastic prospect in the Quebec League in his draft. I had him ranked in the first round. He ended up going to the second round, and now he's one of Colorado's top 2 or 3 defensemen, and they're a Stanley Cup contender. So the idea that small defensemen can't be impactful in this league is losing more and more force as the seasons progress. And I think a guy like Andre is going to add to that. So you're probably looking at another year or two in Sweden. A lot of similarities to Eric Brandstrom, the kid that Ottawa had when they traded Mark Stone. That was a pretty much with Vegas. That was a 1-for-1 swap. Yeah, there was some other guys involved, but that was a Mark Stone for Eric Brandstrom swap. And Brandstrom also played for that same program, HV71. Incredible similarities between the two. So, the last thing I'll say about Andre, I've said about this a million times. I've talked about it. I've written about it, talked about it on my podcast, that at the U18 Five Nations, they lost Anton Johannesson, so they were down to 5 defensemen. I think they were playing Russia or the U.S. in the last game. So either way, they were playing one of the best teams in the tournament. Sweden was not having a good tournament to begin with. Helge Grans was brutal, absolutely abysmal performance at that tournament. William Wallner was kind of up and down. Leo Loof was okay. But I said going into that game, because I think actually they were down to 5 defensemen to start the game, because one guy got suspended, I think. I think Wallner got suspended and Johannesson got hurt. So right off the bat, I even tweeted out, I said, Andre's going to probably have to play like 30, 35 minutes tonight, because if they want any shot at winning. And he did. And he was fine during that entire game. Never got the sense that he was losing steam. He was on every critical situation. So this isn't a case of yours truly pumping up a kid that I had ranked in the first round. I ranked him in the first round for those reasons. You know, so I think it could be a real steal of a pick. But again, with the size thing, you know, history's not on his side.
Yeah, no, but to your point, one, I love that story. But to your point, I mean, it's also an anticipation of the future. I mean, even a guy like Cam York, who we took, he's not a big kid. Like a lot of these defensemen who are getting taken now, you're still going to need those big defensemen. There's no doubt about it, right? It's never going to go away. But there's now becoming roles, you know, that the role itself for offensive defenseman, that's what's becoming a little more dynamic, right? They're willing to put up with the fact that you're a little bit smaller if you're quicker and you're mobile and you get that puck out quickly. It's how you play now matters more than ever. And I'll tell you, Brent Flohr was Brent Flohr said that they were surprised he was available. And they're like, they took him. They didn't think he was going to even be available at that spot. So it sounds like if he was 5 inches taller, he would have been a top 15 pick in the draft.
You know, Drysdale's only 5'11", so you know maybe only 2 inches taller. And Central Scouting was pretty high on him. They gave him a significant bump after that February tournament from their midterm to their final rankings. So it's not like his play had gone unnoticed. I could just see teams watching this year's postseason. And that's the one thing I forgot to mention about the draft, was that huge impact. You could tell that the way that these playoffs went, the Stanley Cup playoffs went, with the physicality and the anger and the abrasiveness and the compete and the size, like the winning in the trenches, so to speak, or winning for every square inch, trench warfare. That's how teams, I think, drafted for the most part. Some teams didn't have to because they already have those needs addressed. But you saw teams that got pushed around. The only exception being Toronto, when it's Kyle Dubas, and he wants to do things differently. But I think that, you know, if you look at a different season, maybe you're looking at definitely a late first-round pick in Andre. So, in my opinion, they got first-round quality in the second round.
It's awesome. That's really good to hear. All right, so I'm going to move on to our 4th-round pick. This is somebody everybody's really excited. He actually, prior to us jumping on this call, just got an ELC contract from the Flyers, which is pretty rare for a 4th-round pick. Now, it was beginning of the 4th round, but pretty rare for a player to get this. So Zayde Wisdom goes 94th overall, a right winger, plays, from what I understand, more of a two-way physical game, complimentary scorer type of guy. We're really excited about him. Also, as a side note, won Wayne Simmons Award, I believe Achievement Award. And for us here in Philly, everything Wayne Simmons does is awesome. So he's Wayne Simmons approved. So we all get excited when we hear that type of stuff. What do you think about Zayde Wisdom?
If he would have been a first-round pick. He is such a smart player. He could finish. He's got great hands. Outstanding anticipation. And that's the one thing I look for is if you can't skate all that great, or, you know, you have a heavy foot, or you don't have a clean stride, or whatever you want to call it, that you're going to have to make up for it by anticipating. And it's not really cherry picking. It's hockey sense. It's anticipating where a pass is going to go to, especially if you're off the puck, the other team has the puck. It's anticipating the direction of travel, anticipating where your teammates are going to be, anticipating where they want you to be, so you could catch that lead pass in stride. Because remember, like, you got to look at it from an offensive zone standpoint or defensive zone standpoint. So let's say you're Zayde Wisdom and you are fronting your point man, right? You're fronting the opposing point man because that's your zone of coverage. And they're working the puck around. You're still kind of like, you know, reading, reacting, but focusing on that point man a little bit, and also the circle because you don't want any shots from there. And so remember, the defenseman is facing the goal. You're facing the other goal. Well, if you anticipate, not only will you be facing the right way when the puck is turned over, but you'll have a good 3 or 4 steps on that defenseman. So you're in full flight now, and that defenseman has to turn around and catch you. And so even guys like the top skating defenseman in the league, whether it be Werenski or Noah Hannafin or Cam McCall, Quinn Hughes, if you have 3 or 4 steps on a guy, it's going to be very difficult for you to catch up to them, and you're either going to have to commit a penalty or you're going to have to make a brilliant play to prevent that guy from getting a scoring chance. So that was basically Wisdom's season from a skating standpoint in a nutshell, was that he was anticipating so well that he was always in open ice. It did not hurt that he had a guy like Shane Wright as his center, and Shane Wright's going to probably be the first overall pick in 2022. And then once Martin Chromiak came over from Slovakia right after the World Juniors, so that was Kingston's top line. It was a Wisdom, I believe, on the right side, Chromiak on the left side, and then Shane Wright in the middle. And my first impression was that maybe Zayde Wisdom is a product of Shane Wright, but after watching at the second and third game, it was clear that he was a very critical piece. But again, the skating is not pretty, and so he's got to work. Now, Wayne Simmons wasn't a great skater either, but Wayne Simmons played in a different era. So if you're a winger and you have the hands and the awareness and the shot and the accuracy and the touch near the net, then maybe it isn't all that important for you to be that great of a skater, especially if you just know how to position yourself. And because a lot of centers will say, centers like Morgan Frost or centers like like a Claude Giroux or whomever would say, hey, just get open. Just get open, okay? Get open, I'll find you. Don't scream for me. Don't bang your stick. Just get open, I'll find you. And so in that case, considering his finish, it's a really good pick. I had him ranked in the 200s or high 200s, just inside the one of the last picks of the draft because I'm concerned about his skating. And as he bulks up and he gets bigger, and I think his issues with skating are definitely more pronounced than Forster's, where Forster's got a longer, cleaner stride, and so maybe you could kind of work with that. Whereas they're just games where he just did not look like he was moving all that fast. And it's a lack of explosiveness. But again, I can't stress enough, the hockey IQ is very high, and I'm happy for the kid. He deserved to get drafted this high. I just have to be, when I see a kid having issues with skating like that consistently, I have to kind of,
Sure. Yeah, and it's understandable. And I think with that situation, I mean, you see the jump in points, and I'm sure Wright has something to do with this. But, I mean, to go from putting up 10 points, a minus 36 in 60 games, to putting up 29 goals, 30 assists, and 59 points in 62 games and a minus 7, that is a humongous improvement for any player. And even if you're not a good player, the fact that you're put with what could be maybe even a generational type of player, or at least a franchise caliber center future in the NHL. I mean, you don't get put with him by accident either, right? You get put there for a reason.
They were legitimately one of the top lines in the OHL, and it wasn't just because of Wright. Like, they had outstanding chemistry. And again, like, that's one of the things I look for. When you go to my rankings, I list like some things that I look for when I'm ranking kids. And if you're riding someone's coattails, I'm really not going to reward you all that much. And it kind of goes back to the whole Farabee-Wahlstrom discussion we had, where I felt like Farabee was just the guy that was doing more to generate the chances, and whereas Wahlstrom was more of like the guy just there to finish. But when you watch Wisdom, a lot of times he created his own offense for that line. His play in the defensive zone, specifically, whether it be chasing someone or just reading or reacting the right way, having a stick position in the right way, that his work alone changed possession. And when the puck was on his stick, it's what you do. You give the puck to this faster guy, you give the puck to the playmaking guy, and you track him, and you try to stay step for step with him as best you can. And then once inside the offensive zone, it was go to the net, go to the net, go to the net. And that's exactly what he does almost as well as anybody in this draft. So I sense a huge point explosion from him next season. You're looking at probably maybe 40, 45 goals. I think he's that good. But again, get him the right skating coaches and work on his explosiveness. No issues with that. Yeah. But again, look what we're talking about here. We're talking about a 4th round pick just outside the top 100. This is exactly the kind of kid you want to draft in the 4th round. Huge potential with only 1 or 2 minor drawbacks.
Absolutely. And what comes to mind when I think about this, Travis Konechny was said to have skating problems. I never really saw that, but Oscar Lindblom was a guy who was, I know, ranked at one point, made his way all the way down to the 5th to the Flyers. And obviously that was a complete steal for us because, I mean, you look at him today, you wouldn't even know that he had skating problems, and he's by far one of our He was a top line left wing on our team before getting diagnosed with cancer. And we expect him to come back and still be a really good player. The fact he played in the playoffs is just mind blowing. But I think we found something like that here in Wisdom, and I think we're all really excited about it.
Yeah.
All right, so we got 2 more here. We have, I'm going to definitely say this wrong because we talked about this ahead of time. Elliot Denoye. Did I get it right? Almost. Okay. Almost got it. But we'll have to learn that one. Obviously, a French-Canadian name. Now playing for Halifax, I believe. But what do you think about him? A left winger, I believe. Good size. I think he's about 6 foot tall, 5'11", something like that.
Yeah. All right. So Denoye is a pest. He's like pesky. He's a water bug. He's jittery. Not explosively fast, decent speed. You know what I mean? I'd say average to above average. There, he'll win some foot races, he'll lose some. Where it's not like the other team's like, oh, he's on the ice. We got to, afford ourselves a big gap to protect against his speed. He could be an inside player. He could be an outside player. The one thing about him is he played for a stacked team. So even though he got moved to Halifax, which stunk last year, he was with Moncton. And Moncton was loaded on the wing, and he played wing himself. And so last year we looked at him. I just saw he wasn't a big guy. I think he grew a little bit, but he wasn't a very big guy last year in his draft -1. And we thought of him as a guy who would maybe take the next step and be a big player on the team. And for whatever reason, they kept him as a depth player, like a little bit of a role play, a middle 6 type, bouncing between the 2nd and the 3rd line. But he had a huge spike in shot attempts. And so when I watched a few games, he was definitely more noticeable. The production just was not there. A lot of shots hitting into the goalie's crest. I don't want to say low percentage shots, but the thing is about him is he could wear down an opposing defense in the other zone. Like, he's so jittery and agile, moving different directions, starting and stopping, strong on the puck, excellent puck control skills. So, but we never saw him as a top line guy. He never played with really any top line people. Never saw the prime opportunities, and so you saw this huge decrease in production, although his shot volume doubled. So you got to be a little leery about that. And eventually everything averages out, especially when it comes to shots and shot shooting percentage. But now that he's going to Halifax and they're a little kind of rebuilding, maybe that since he's going to be a draft +1, that they'll give him a shot as a top line guy and see what he can do. But again, there are a lot of little things that he does really well, but getting under your skin. I think in the scouting report, I wrote that he's like MC Ren because he's always into something, an old NWA reference. For some of you graybeards out there, he's just always into something. He's involved after the whistle. He's involved in a board battle, involved in front of the net, involved in a change of possession, involved in an odd man rush. There's definitely a lot to like there. So I think I had him ranked in the 300s, like 308 or 307. But remember, I include goalies in my rankings as well. So you could consider him one of the top, I would say, 200 forwards in the draft, first-year eligibles in the draft, and where they drafted him, kind of like, was it middle of the 5th round or late in the 5th round? A little bit higher than I thought, but still, he's the kind of guy that drives you nuts if you play against him. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, you're always kind of looking, and I brought this up in our last episode too. You're always looking for that guy who might be getting a bigger role to see how they handle it. And so far with Halifax, from my understanding, I mean, he's got an A on his chest from what I see online. which I think is also a jump in responsibility. And then if he's on a deeper team, you assume that his usage will go up. So they probably want to see how he responds. And as a later pick, you go, okay, well, at the bare minimum, maybe he's a bottom six guy in the NHL. Maybe he's a fourth line grinder or something like that. Maybe he's just a good AHL player. But if he actually gets more responsibility and then, proves he has a little bit more to give, all of a sudden his confidence goes up, maybe his work ethic goes up, and then maybe you found yourself a third line player in the NHL, later in the draft, right?
Even a fourth line guy. If you got a fourth line guy who could play 70, 75 games a season, kill penalties, give you that spark off the bench that coaches are always looking for, then that's fine. You're not always looking for home runs in the later rounds. Like, you want to find NHL players, period. I even said it this: if you get a top 10 pick, like let's say a Pavel Zacha, and he develops into a really good bottom six center that could win faceoffs and kill penalties. All right, so he's not going to become a superstar like you thought, but he's still an NHL player who contributes. So, always consider the other options when it comes to the development of these kids, that they're not always going to hit when it comes to the point production. And that's why I try to tell people, like, stop looking at the stats. Like, coaches love coachability. They love effort. They love the kids that lead by example. Doesn't matter how many points they score. Yeah, you need scoring, but at the same time, when it goes to especially with these prospect camps and these development camps, I could see a guy like Desnoyers showing up there and putting on a show, and the other guys, the higher ranked guys, being like, oh man, this Desnoyers kid's freaking nonstop. He's making us look stupid with his effort, and that might drive them to be better. And then even the coach will say, hey, listen, Mr. First overall pick, or Mr. 15th overall pick, that sixth round, I just outperformed the heck out of you through the entire week. So you better find, and I'm not saying that's how they talk to him, but, good option for the middle rounds. And he does not have to become a scorer to be an effective NHL player, I think.
Yeah, and I get that sense with him and with Wisdom, and I do agree with you. I think culturally, I think organizations love it, right? Because it breeds competition from within and confidence and all that stuff. So totally agree. All right, we got a few more names here. So let's finish the last one for the draft, and we'll go through the last remaining three prospects here. So last pick of the draft, I think this one is more of a high risk, high reward type of guy, high skilled, because again, undersized forward, which not as big of a deal because of forward. Connor McClennon, again, 18 years old. This kind of happened because the time at the draft. Played for the Winnipeg Ice last year. Had a pretty strong season, I believe, playing with Peyton Krebs, a guy that seems to be an offensive player and maybe could develop to somebody in the NHL. What do you think?
Now, I had McClennon. He was a first-round pick season. I think I had him in the top 20. High-profile Bantam prospect. I think he was a first-round pick in the WHL Bantam draft. So he's always been on the radar. Hockey Canada radar. Played for them at the Hlink, I believe. U17 World U17 Hockey Challenge. So he's a guy that was always considered to be one of the notable Western Canadian forwards for the 2020 draft, at least the 2002 year group. I watched him play this season. He seemed fine. I knocked him somewhere a more modest third or fourth round pick. I think I had him somewhere in the third round. So I was very surprised that he lasted that long. He's a very enthusiastic kid. Tons of enthusiasm, always in front of the net. He's not very big. Skating is decent. Definitely has like deceptive quickness, and that's more goes back to like the anticipation and the maybe sometimes explode to the puck and win those battles. But he's just got this like a great attitude. He's always willing to do those tough assignments, tackle those tough assignments. He played on the top power play unit with Winnipeg, was used as mostly a net front guy, but he tipped in a lot of shots. So that's good hand-eye coordination. Never really saw him as a major line driver. And the only thing, maybe that kind of hurt him in the rankings, and that's maybe I was a little bit too generous with his top 100 ranking, was that with playing with a guy like Krebs, it was, I got the puck, here, you take it, now I'm gone, and you do your magic. Not that he was avoiding traffic or avoiding the puck. It's just that he was off the puck a lot in the offensive zone. At least that's what my notes tell me. And that a lot of the work was involving the defenseman Zlotty, activating. Of course, guys like Krebs, they had the other kid there. What was his name? Peterson? Was it Owen Peterson, I think was his name? Yeah, so like that was like the crew, the main crew that they had there in Winnipeg. And, but still, it was a surprise he went that late. I think when you're a high-profile kid from the time that you're a young teenager, you have to think that a team would have been willing to take a gamble on him. And I think he had some injury issues as well, so maybe that might have
only 42 games played, so probably.
Yeah, I forgot. I wrote it in the draft report. I forgot exactly what it was, but let me pull it up because I definitely remember when I actually broke down like a lot of kids. What I'll do is if I see them low in a ranking or falling, I'll dig deep and see. Well, listen, I watched this kid. He was great. So let me dig deep and try to figure out what went wrong. Is it a change of line mates? Is he hurt? And with Mclennan, I never got the sense that it was anything. But I think I had him ranked somewhere in the 70s. I'm trying to pull up his. This should be coming up right. All right, here we go. I had him ranked 74th. So here, I'll read some of the. 25 of his final 28 points came at 5-on-5. He didn't play on the line with Krebs the whole season, but when he did, he got that spike in scoring. So again, ties back to the line driving, that he wasn't much of a line driver until he got to that top line. And when he was on that top line, he wasn't really driving it all that much. And then, of course, I think he's listed at 5'8". I don't know what the injury was, but he definitely was. Central Scouting was low on him. They ranked him 65th. So when you factor in Europe and the goalies, you're looking at about a 125, 130 pick. So maybe he was picked where he was expected to go, but I don't know. Maybe he was on my part. I was a little bit patient with him, expecting him to be more, but we'll see. I definitely like the 5-on-5 production. That was a big thing. So we'll have to just kind of let this one play out long term. It'll be a long-term thing, but again, don't be surprised if you look up one day, you see him in the AHL, and he's putting up 20, 25 goals in his first and second year there.
Yeah, especially being undersized, the fact that he's putting out the points at 5-on-5 and not on the power play when he has a man advantage or something like that. Like physically, he's not getting thrown around just because he's 5'8", and we see enough of those guys. So, okay, that was an awesome breakdown, and definitely check out Steve's site. I do want to go quickly through 3 players in the Flyer system. We went through a big list last time, but a few of the names that I think stuck out that we can still talk about. We talked about Isaac Ratcliffe, Ronnie Otard, and German Rubtsov. Let's talk about German Rubtsov first, since he's a little bit older and he's ready to go into the NHL pretty soon if he can ever get healthy. Yeah. What do you think about German?
The health is the number one issue. I don't think he'll ever be a top-line player that I expected him to be in his draft year of 2016, but he could be a very good defensive bottom six center. He could win face-offs. He could be physical. He could deal with the forecheck, or he could apply pressure on the forecheck himself. It's just that the kid cannot stay healthy. I think it's been concussions and shoulders and knee. It seems like it's been everything. So if he could find a way to stay healthy, I'm definitely pulling for him. He's been in Lehigh Valley now for a couple of years now. That hasn't really. I think he might have had like one period. Was it 2 years ago or last year?
Yeah, he was on fire. Yep.
Where he was really good, and then this year was just a struggle. Lehigh Valley, I don't think was all that good this year, though, were they? They were kind of like mediocre.
For whatever reason, we were really bad, and actually, German almost made the team out of camp. He did impress our coaching staff quite a bit.
Yeah, so it could be a situation where just everything that could go wrong goes wrong. And so I look at the stats with a grain of salt. But again, the quickness, the agility, the speed, the size, the power in his game, the defensive acumen, I like it. I still think that there's some potential there. It's just, with the Flyers kind of like contending now, it's going to be tough for him to get a role. So maybe they're just waiting another year or two. We just don't know.
Yeah. He's doing well in the KHL right now. I'm very high on him, but for the same reason. I see him as a third-line scorer, playmaker type of guy. Can play, play two-way against better players, but also can contribute, hopefully, down the line, like about 50 points, 40 points in the NHL. Like another Scott Lawton. We kind of have that with Lawton a little bit, just more of a playmaker. All right, let's get to the next one. Let's do Ronnie Otard.
Yeah, the big bomber. I think he just turned 21, right? So he's not a spring chicken from a prospect standpoint, because he was drafted as, I think, a double overager, and then he went to Western Michigan, playing for Andy Murray there. And that's the big thing about, when you play for Andy Murray, and I think the Flyers have some type of pipeline or some relationship with Andy Murray, because they've drafted a couple of kids from that program, or that went to that program. I think the big kid, why am I forgetting his name, from 2016? Was it with the big fly, the prospect, the kid that they drafted in 2016?
Ratcliffe, you talking about?
No, the other kid.
Oh, Allison?
Yeah, Wade Allison.
Yeah, he's over there. Yep.
Yeah, but listen, he hits hard. He's got that big shot. Didn't watch a whole lot of Western Michigan this year, but clearly I look like he got his feet wet, and he's willing to maybe take that next step. They got the other kid there. I think Matthias Sanderson is there as well, and he's a pretty big hitter. So it's like he plays for like a mean physical type of a team that always exacts their will on opponents. And so the fact that he's was able to step in and be used on the power play, use that big shot. Do I see him as maybe one day become a Sheldon Surrey type? Who knows? But again, I understood exactly why the Flyers drafted him last year. And so there's every reason to be promising. And he adds a wrinkle. The Flyers have a lot of prospects. They have a lot of good defensemen, but he's one of the few where it's like heavy hitter, big bomb from the point. I mean, there you go. So it's not like he has to do a whole lot of moving. You could just set him up at the point, or have him patrol that neutral zone and have that intimidation factor. So so far so good with his development. Really no issues to be worried about him.
Yeah, on paper, he has it all, right? The big shot, he's right-handed, he's 6'4", he can skate. He has a really positive attitude from what I've seen. Just always smiling on the ice from what I've seen. So, I think it made sense at the time, and I'm hoping he could definitely be an NHL guy for sure. But we'll see. Time will tell. So let's go with the last one. This is the most exciting one, I think, of these names. This is a guy that I personally am very high on, but I always saw him as a long-term project. I never saw him making the NHL quickly. I always saw as like once he does make the NHL, he's going to be very effective. Isaac Ratcliffe. What do you think about Isaac?
Yeah, he's a big and physical. So, big-time goal scorer in junior hockey. Definitely always take those stats with a grain of salt because he wasn't one of, I guess, the elite players from his draft year. But then again, 2017 was so much of a mixed bag that you're going to get some kids in those later rounds that are going to outperform the notable kids. No major glaring issues with his play this year in the AHL, the few games I caught. The thing about him is he's got the size, he's got the deceptive quickness to a degree, and he's also got the physicality. Well, yeah, he's got the shot, he's got the hands, of course, but also an underrated playmaker as well. But again, some of these kids might have to reinvent themselves. So if he's not scoring goals, is he impacting shifts off the puck? And he actually can. So, you put him on a line with a guy like, let's say, Morgan Frost, or maybe a kid line, or you have him as just a bottom line energy kind of a guy who just throws his weight around and is able to use that long reach to his advantage. So I know a lot of us, you look at the multiple 40-goal seasons in the year, you got to say, well, he'll be a 30-goal scorer in the NHL. Doesn't always work that way. And so he'll probably have to. The one thing I like, though, is that he works so hard that I think you are going to see him earn at least a look on a third line or a second line, especially with some of the veterans getting a little bit older. You might see him get a shot. So I like him. I like him a lot. I love the abrasiveness. I like the physicality. I like the toughness. He's not just a guy that goes out there and tries to score. Like, he's not timid. He plays a tough game.
Mm-hmm. And it seemed like it was kind of growing into his body quite a bit too when he showed up, at least at our development camps to start. And even like now in the NHL, he put up a very modest 15 points. Most of those points were actually towards the end of the season. So he had a very, very slow start, but then started building up a lot of momentum. But like we said, Lehigh was not a very good team. They're going to look to vastly improved that team, I guess over the offseason here. But he is a guy that I do see. I see him starting off as like a third line player, maybe the fourth line in the NHL, kind of working his way up. And, if the one thing you wonder with a guy that size is because when they're so big, I feel like they become a target in a lot of ways as well. Because you assume that they're the physical one, right? And if they don't have that tenacity in their personality, that's where I feel like it goes wrong for a lot of big guys. So that's where I'm hoping that Ratcliffe knows that, he's a scorer, but you might not be a sniper in the NHL. You might have to be the guy who scores around the net. You might have to, force your way. The way Wisdom plays, right? Like that's the way Isaac Ratcliffe might have to play in the NHL to be an effective goal scorer, because he might have to rely less on his skill and more on, his ability, the fact that he's larger and be more complementary in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
All right. So this was an awesome episode. Thank you for all the info. Steve, one more time, everybody can follow you at The Draft Analyst on Twitter. You have your website, thedraftanalyst.com. Again, check out his draft reports, check out his rankings, all that stuff. He's got a podcast as well, available on iTunes and on Spotify. Subscribe, give him a rating, but that stuff is really great. And you see, he goes off. You do it by yourself, like pretty much majority of the time, right, Steve?
Oh yeah. It's I'm a one-man show. Not that I'm a control freak, just that I just the logistics of getting everything together, and I'm just only so much time I have during the day. So yeah, it's just a one-man show. But so far so good. I think that I looked up one day and I saw my podcast was like ranked like 157th in all of the United States sports. Because of like, I guess I was doing those draft previews for each team, and I started getting all these emails from people. Hey, we want to do collaborations, and hey, you want to advertise? I'm like, Jesus, I went from having like 5 downloads a month to like 350 downloads a month, and 350 downloads a day because of all the different teams I was doing. So I'm going to do the same thing with the draft wrap-ups. Each team's going to get a draft recap, awesome. But it'll only be like 35 minutes long. I'm not going to do freaking 2 hours for the draft. The podcast, you can find it on SoundCloud, iTunes, Spotify. Give me a rating. Tell me what you think. Subscribe. Do whatever.
Awesome and totally worth it. And you can see the breadth of knowledge he has, and it's obviously paying off, and that's so awesome to hear. Definitely will continue to support that, and I'm definitely going to ask you to come back on here to talk some more. So thank you again, Steve. Really appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Like and subscribe as well, please, if you like, and we're going to keep bringing more to you. Thank you, everybody, and remember to always stay gritty.